Welcome in, everybody, to week number 5 of Northeast Indiana football. My name is Jeff Mahoney with Summit City Sports. We have Casey O'Boyle with Northeast Indiana Game Night. Casey, it's hard to believe that we're already in week number 5. We've got a log jam in the SAC for second place. We have 4 teams right there at second place. Snider's with a 2-1 record after last week's no game with Southside. But we're going to get some questions answered this Friday, and it starts with Carroll at Bishop Dwenger.
Yeah, 2 make or break type games with Carroll at Bishop Dwenger, and then, of course, Snider out at Homestead. The Carroll-Dwenger game certainly is intriguing. Since Coach Garrett's been at Bishop Dwenger, the Saints have never lost back-to-back games. So that's potentially in play here. I think a lot of people feel like Carroll should be the favorite, and deservedly so. But this is an interesting game. I mean, can the Saints pass defense perform well enough to hang around? This Carroll passing game, Jeff, to me anyways, doesn't seem to be on quite as prolific as it was a year ago. I'm sure some of that has to do with the coaches in the area kind of figuring some things out defensively. And then I think also no Mason Englert. He was such a dynamic player for them. And then Jameson Coverstone, of course, had a tremendous season a year ago as well. So right now it's a lot of Coverstone. Hanson Hafner, the young sophomore receiver, is starting to emerge. They've got other guys like Cooper Rudolph, certainly, and AJ Lazoff. So they've got weapons. But, you know, not having Mason Englert to go get those jump balls, that could be Hafner. That could be the coming out party that we've seen from him recently. But can the Saints defense keep that Carroll passing game down is the question mark. And will the Saints respond? You know, like I said, they've never lost 2 in a row under Coach Garrett. Usually, and this goes back even before Coach Garrett, back to the Chris Schwarzkopf era, the Saints, when they are underdogs, typically rise up and play with a spirited effort. So I expect it to be a very competitive game out at Shields Field.
Casey, in this game, Carroll's defense has really looked strong this year, and the Saints offense had a hard time really getting going last week against Homestead. Homestead really controlled that game from the onset. Do you think it'll be different this week with the Dwenger offense being able to keep up toe for toe with Carroll?
Well, I think so. Just from the standpoint, I think they threw a lot at the wall last week in terms of their quarterback play to see what stuck. And Evan Springer kind of settled in the second half and did some nice things. But early on there, Jeff, and I'm sure you saw some of the game as well, that it looked like they were grabbing at straws a little bit. They theoretically had 4 different guys taking snaps because KJ Titman opened the game with a Wildcat snap. And then, of course, the Campbell kid had Sam Campbell had a Wildcat possession as well. So when you factor in those 2 guys, Evan Springer at the starting quarterback, Bodie Dickerson, the backup quarterback, you've got now 4 different guys called in cadence. That leads to some illegal procedures. That leads to your offensive linemen not being real comfortable and being able to fire off confidently. There's a lot going on there. And I think the Saints did such a nice job on that first possession where they pretty much just ran the ball right down the field and they jumped out on top 7-0 last week against Homestead. And then things just kind of went haywire for a while. And then it felt like they were grabbing at straws a little bit in terms of who they wanted to be their guy. I think Evan Springer is that guy. Bodie Dickerson took the majority of snaps in the JV game against Homestead on Monday, which tells me that Springer's probably going to be the guy going forward. And so, yeah, I think that'll help the Saints offense get a little bit more continuity too. Just having that consistent cadence and that, reliable guy behind center that, he's the guy. I mean, what's the old cliche, Jeff? If you've got 2 or 3 quarterbacks, you've got none. It applies to high school football too, I think. I mean, I just think there's something to be said for having one guy take the lion's share of snaps. You get used to the cadence, you get used to his command in the huddle. And then that you allow that guy to get comfortable, because of all the positions in this wonderful sport, quarterback is the one where it's all about consistency, comfort level, confidence. And I think Evan Springer needs to be that guy for the Saints, at least until further notice. But that's what I expect. Talking to Coach Garrett, he said they're going to still, keep Wildcat in their arsenal. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see more of that tonight. But by the same token, I think as far as throwing the ball, Evan Springer is probably going to be the guy, at least, in the short term.
Yeah, and in this one, the Swami has Carroll by 6. Well, up next, it's Bishop Luers traveling to Northside. Bishop Luers ranked number 1 in the AP poll and the coaches poll. And Northside is coming off its first win of the season at Wayne last week. Jonte Lambert, another great performance with 3 touchdowns. He's been very consistent, probably the most consistent player for Northside all season long.
Yeah, and he's probably been the most healthy, and that's certainly part of the equation. That they've had some quarantine issues, they've had some other injuries, of course, losing their starting quarterback. But I think people feel like Northside is still very, very dangerous. I mean, let's not forget week 1. If it wasn't for that miracle kick by Talamentes, and Snider doesn't win that game, and we're probably feeling completely different about Northside. But instead, they lose a heartbreaker. They start the season 0-3. Coach Ben Johnson gets his first W as a varsity head coach last week at Wayne. So does that give them a little momo going into this contest this week? I think so. And we also, let's harken back a year ago to that fantastic finish between Northside and Luers, where Luers stole the game late. 2 touchdowns, I think, inside the last minute and a half. It looked like Northside's game to be won. There's a score there, 49-46 out at Luers Field. One of those fantastic finishes that seems like we get 3 or 4 every year. That was probably the best game of the regular season last year, Jeff, in my opinion. And so there's a little revenge perhaps for the Northside kids, coming into this game feeling like, hey, they let one slip away last year. Luers is going to be a big favorite, but certainly Northside knows they've got the personnel that they can match up. And I like Northside's secondary. If there is an athletic secondary in the area that can match up with Bishop Luers playmakers on the perimeter, it might be Northside. So this could be a potentially difficult game for Luers, especially if Northside has some success running the ball with Jonte Lambert.
Ryan Collins getting involved in the offense last week with 4 catches for 52 yards. Absolutely, Northside won this game 3 years ago, getting Coach Mike Brevard his first victory as head coach for the Legends, 52-49, another great game. So the last 3 years, this by far has been one of the best series in the SAC to keep an eye on. As far as Luers is concerned, Casey, they just keep rolling. Another win last week. They sit atop the SAC all by themselves, 4-0. They really weren't tested against Concordia, 49-14. And Brody Glenn and Carson Clark look like they're putting up some of the best numbers that we've ever seen in the SAC.
Yeah, I think going into the season, we knew that side of the ball was going to be really, really strong. And in particular, those 2 players. Carson Clark, senior quarterback, the lefty, has really matured. Coach Stansky's done a tremendous job, I think, developing him. You look at Brody Glenn, who there's a lot of other receivers in the area that seem to get a lot of attention and hype, but Brody Glenn just produces. The kid comes out week after week and really puts up big numbers. Those 2 together are fantastic, and we did know that going in. The question mark was, do they have enough in the trenches? And maybe even more importantly, are they going to improve on the defensive side of the ball? And they have. It may not completely look that way with some of these final scores, but their defense has drastically improved, Jeff. 2 defensive scores a week ago for the Knights. If they're getting points off their special teams and their defense, this team is really, really scary good. And that's what's happening right now. That's why they're blowing teams out. That's why they're a prohibitive favorite to win not only the SAC, but certainly a Class 2A state championship.
And last year, at times, it was Sir Hale that carried this team. He had a great game last week again for the Knights. He just got injured towards the end of the year. But if Sir Hale can stay healthy, no doubt about it, it's going to be a special season for Bishop Luers. And the Swami has the Knights by 21 in this game.
Yeah, I think that seems about right. About a 3 touchdown favorite. But that being said, Northside's got the athletes; they can hang around in this for sure.
Well, up next we have Snider who had a week off last week. They're ranked number 9 in the AP poll, number 6 in the coaches poll in 5A. They'll travel to Homestead to take on the 6A number 9 ranked, 11 in the coaches poll, Homestead Spartans. Casey, Homestead, their offense doesn't necessarily look like it did the last 2 years, but it's definitely been productive through the air and on the ground.
Yeah, the Peyton Slavin, the junior quarterback, I thought he had a really nice game last week against the Saints. I was a little surprised that Dwenger stayed in man coverage as long as they did. And they put some of those DBs, especially their cornerbacks, on an island without any safety help. And the Spartans were able to burn them. The first play of the game after Dwenger went up 7-0 was a touchdown over top, beautiful post pass to from Slavin to Nate Anderson, and he took it to the house, and the track meet was on. So Homestead, again, I talked about Coach Stansky out at Luers. I got to give, props to Coach Skelton out at Homestead. I think he does a great job developing quarterbacks and calling an offense. 37 points on that Dwenger defense is pretty impressive. And, it was, 21-7 at half, 28-7 in the third quarter. And pretty much the game was over. By the time Dwenger started to open it up a little bit and move the ball, it was too little too late. So Homestead are they as potent or powerful as they've been the last few years? I'd say no, but it doesn't mean they don't have playmakers. They're missing their running back, Des Smith, this week. Again, he's out with injury, but the Brett, I think it's pronounced Fox. I'm not sure how you pronounce Fox with that spelling, but that's not my decision. I think the Swami said this week that was phonetically fake news. But that kid's a really good running back, very fast, hits the hole really hard. They've got great weapons. Of course, Nate Anderson, I already mentioned. Gage Sparrow's tremendous, another good receiver, number 3 for the Homestead offense. They've got playmakers for sure. And I think that offensive line doesn't get the credit they deserve. I think if you watch film on them and talking to some coaches here locally, that's maybe the most underappreciated part of Homestead football right now is that offensive line that feels like it rebuilds every year because it's always so senior dominated. These kids get off the ball, they fire off simultaneously, and they really get a hat on an opposing player every single snap to give these guys chances to make plays.
Well, Casey, in this game, you have Homestead by 15. Snider with a week off. They do have the top running back in the SAC, and Tyrese Brown, who has 622 yards on the year. He might be the area's leading rusher if he plays last week against Southside. But that week off, does it hurt Snider or help Snider in this game?
That's a great question, Jeff, and I pondered that myself all week long. There's something to be said for playing week after week and getting into rhythm, getting Friday night reps. Even if you're facing an opponent that you should beat, which Snider certainly would have been a big favorite last week against Southside, but not having that, you wonder if there's a little rust. But by the same token, it probably gave them 2 or 3 extra days to focus on Homestead. And if they want to stay in the SAC title chase, clearly they have to win this game. Both teams do. Homestead was preparing for Bishop Dwenger. Snider was preparing for Homestead. They had an extra 2 or 3 days. Coach Tittman didn't tell me that, but I'm no dummy. I'm sure they were looking ahead, knowing that they weren't playing the Archers. And they probably sprinkled in some things, maybe added a few new wrinkles for this game tonight. And we'll see. I mean, we're going to find out, I would say, within a quarter or two of this game tonight. If Snider comes out blazing and they look really sharp and confident, I think that little bit of a layoff might have paid dividends. Conversely, if they stumble a little bit and they look flat, we might say just the opposite.
Well, I'd say for Snider, Casey, by far the biggest question is defensive backfield, and will Hopper and his receivers, Juarez and Billingsley, really get going this week?
Right. I think Billingsley, Jeff, might be out with an injury. So that takes their receiving core down another guy. And I know they've had some attrition in the trenches too. So I think this is a Tyrese Brown type game for sure. And Langston level, those two guys, if they can carry the load and Luke Hopper can sprinkle in some play action passes to the tight ends and to Juarez, I think we might need to see some more bootlegs and some quarterback draws utilizing Hopper's legs. I don't think Snyder's done enough of that yet this year offensively. He's a really, really good runner, maybe not as good as his big brother Michael, but he's pretty good runner. And I think we need to see more of that from the Snider offense.
Yeah, Michael continues to do good things at Indiana State. Well, up next, we have your hot ticket game. It's Leo traveling to East Noble. Leo ranks number 3 in the AP, 4 in the coaches. East Noble's number 6 in the AP, 3 in the coaches poll. So East Noble jumped Leo this week after coming out to a huge start at DeKalb, up 42-0 at the half.
Yeah, this is what a fantastic matchup. I know people in the SAC kind of poo-poo it to a certain degree, but I'm telling you, these are two really good football teams, as you know, Jeff. Lots of talent. We got D1 guys on both rosters. We've got tons of size too. I mean, you talk about some big beasts. I mean, 6'8" Chris Hood up at East Noble is a mountain man. Of course, you've got Landon Livingston and DJ Allen, both Division I football players and trenchmen for the Leo Lions. They say these kind of games are often won in the trenches. I think Leo has a slight edge in that category. In the skill positions, though, certainly when you're talking the passing game, you've got to give the edge to East Noble for no other reason than Leo just doesn't pass the ball, or they haven't to this point. But there's a good shot. Look at all those ball carriers. That's just last week. Carson Hepner kind of led the way with 101 yards, but Mason Sharon, Ethan Crawford, Caden Miller. Think about where he was a year ago and how he was grabbing headlines. You can make an argument he's probably their 4th best running back right now. And then Max Leffler is also in the mix. Those 4 or 5 guys are all capable of having 50 to 75 yards, 100 yards apiece in tonight's game. They do such a good job with their offense. They're very patient. You know, they can go from, 2nd and 9, 3rd and 7, and then boom, hit a 60-yarder. And Jackson Barber, the quarterback, there's a good look at him there in GameNight, does a real nice job with his play fakes and rollouts and things of that nature. We're probably going to have to see some passing at some point because East Noble figured them out a year ago, remember, in the sectional, Jeff. After losing 24-0 in the regular season, the East Noble Knights came back and beat Leo in the sectional championship 10-0. And so it's a revenge game, certainly for Leo. That's been, a bad taste in their mouth for a whole year now. I really like what Leo's done in terms of their defense, and it's senior-laden team. This is their year. If they're going to make a run to Indianapolis, this would be the year for sure for Coach Jared Sauter. We've talked all year long. Here we are, week 5. Are they going to throw a little bit more? Do they have a couple tricks up their sleeve in terms of the passing game? This may be one of those games. Certainly, this is their stiffest opponent to date. This may be one of those games we see it. We may have to see it. Rylan Crawford is certainly an option in their double tight sets to maybe drag him across the field and have a rollout with the left-handed quarterback. And we'll just see. I think Jackson Barber can throw a football, as you guys saw last week. He's got the ability. They just don't do a lot of it. But East Noble's very, very good, and they've got great skill guys. Some of those skill guys play both ways, like Kane Carrico, who was on the cover of this week's issue. Really, really good running back. Big, strong kid, plays defensive end also for East Noble. You've got Nick Munson, of course, who's kind of their electrifying guy in the seam, who can just is a bit of a burner, real reliable, great hands. And then, of course, 6'5" Rowan Zolman at safety and wide receiver. A fantastic athlete, a Division I prospect. These are all really, really capable guys. Can that young quarterback handle the pressure? Xander Brazel is his name. Sophomore, had a real nice, efficient game last week. Pretty much all that damage was in the first half. 4 TDs, no interceptions, over 200 yards. This is a kid that's grown up right before our eyes. Definitely a newcomer of the year candidate for GameNight's awards at the end of the years. But for me, I give Leo a slight edge for having a senior quarterback, having the dominating offensive line. If they can run the ball and get 3, 4, 5 yards a pop and keep that high-powered East Noble offense on the sidelines, I think Leo pulls this thing out late.
Well, Casey, you're right. Jackson Barber last week, even though it wasn't recorded, did have 2 completed passes, both to Rylan Crawford for 2-point conversions. In this game, you got to look at the East Noble defensive line. Trace Holiday on the year has 4 sacks, a forced fumble, 5 tackles for loss, 19 tackles. And East Noble's led by Bryce Charles, the nose tackle, 6'1", 255, 31 tackles, 3 tackles for a loss, or 4 tackles for loss, and 3 sacks. I kind of like this defensive line for East Noble. It's just, can they withstand that constant beating from Leo, as you alluded to earlier?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that both Trace Holiday and Bryce Charles both are returning all Northeast 8 conference guys from a year ago. So they're no secret to the folks in the NE8. They're fantastic defensive linemen. You got Tristan Ward, also 6'7", 205 in the defensive trenches. And then, of course, we mentioned Kanan Carrico. Kanan is a really good football player, but he carries so much of their load offensively. Is there some attrition factors late in a game like this? If he's having to carry 20 to 25 times, does that affect him defensively? That's certainly a big question mark, because this Leo offensive line, in my opinion, is the best in the area. I don't think there's any disputing it anymore.
Yeah, Leo's offensive line averaging 260 a man. East Noble at 249, and a lot of that's because Chris Hood goes 6'8", 325. I'm really excited to see Rylan Crawford and Logan Barnett kind of anchoring that defense in the back line there at safety against this passing game from East Noble. And Casey, in this one, the Swami says it's Leo by 3.
Yeah, I think it's a relatively low scoring game, somewhere in the 17-14, somewhere like that. I think Leo will have some success running the ball, but I don't think they're going to have those big hitters necessarily that we've seen, those 50, 60, 70-yard chunk plays in the ground game. I think it's going to be more methodical. It's going to come down to turnovers. They've had some games the last couple of years where they've been a little fumble prone, and if they put the ball on the turf tonight up in Kendallville, East Noble will win this game.
Well, this is going to be a good game in the area when number 14 Concordia travels to Northrop to take on the 5A Bruins. Northrop, both these teams have kind of struggled a little bit this season. Northrop getting the 13-12 win against Wayne, and Concordia opened the season up with a 42-20 win against Southside. But Casey, where do you see these two programs right now? Northrop did do some good things last week against Carroll.
They did, and they were coming off of that nice win over Wayne in week 3. These are two teams that desperately need this game. I mean, I feel like that's a recurring theme this week. This is kind of scrimmage week where a lot of these teams played each other. And Concordia and Northrop, I call it the Dorfler Bowl. A lot of ties here between the coaching staffs. Both these teams, one of these teams is going to get this win and feel really good about the direction of their season. The loser is going to drop to 1-4 and feel like they're back to the drawing board. So I think it's a game that can go either way. I give Northrop a slight edge just because I think they've got a little more continuity right now with their personnel. Mike Eschbach, the new coach over at Concordia, said that Bubba Craig is supposed to be back this week. He did not play last week. And then, of course, they were missing their quarterback, Eli Maddox, who has had a really good season. So Jace Parnan had to take the lion's share of snaps behind center last week. Jace Parnan is kind of the Swiss Army knife, I call him. He can do about everything for Concordia. He punts, he returns kicks, he returns punts, he plays receiver, he plays running back, now he plays quarterback. He was that kind of player for us at St. Charles, and just a real likable kid, hard-nosed kid, good high school football player. And they put a lot on his shoulders this year as they've moved guys around. They don't have a lot of depth out at Concordia. But again, talking to Coach Eschbach, he expects, he thinks Eli could be back this week, and he definitely thought Bubba Craig, the 6'8" offensive lineman, would be back, and they really need him in the trenches. But then on the other side, Northrop, they're hard to figure out. Again, we talked earlier this year, last year they had Demarius Cowan at running back, and it felt like they had some good things going in their running game. Now they can't really run the ball consistently, but they've got some real playmakers in their passing attack. Dane Kilby may not be able to go tonight, but you've got certainly two playmakers in CJ Davis and Jaden Schmink, two really, really good receivers. They have to run the ball with a little bit of success to set up that pass for Roosevelt Norfleet, the quarterback. And Keon Bates, there's a good shot of him in this issue of Game Night. I think he's waiting in the wings. He's ready to make some plays too. So they got a couple candidates there. Jelante Hinton, the big sophomore stud, is back, and I think it's good to see him at defensive end for the Northrop defense. So this to me is a coin flip game. It could go either way. I think it's like a 28-21 type game. I'm giving a slight edge to the Bruins.
Well, Casey, up next, we're going to look at Southside traveling to Wayne. Kind of surprised right now, if you ask me, that Wayne has yet to win a game on the season. Southside did get the 26-14 win over Northrop. This seems like Wayne's played pretty good, but just haven't been able to pick up that victory.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. That this is a strange season for Coach Haydock's team. Again, not a lot of depth. They've been hit hard by some injuries, some quarantine issues. They've had a player or two maybe not make the grade or get let go because of disciplinary reasons. So they're a little shorthanded in that regard, but they keep fighting. And to your point, Jeff, it seems like every week they're competing. Last week, they jump out 8-0 on Northside, caught the Legends off guard with a real nice pass play from Aiden Mink to Sean Collins. And it looked for a minute like, okay, this could be that week. Wayne's going to figure some things out, especially since they got a home run with their passing game. And then they could settle in and maybe run the ball a little bit, Sherwood Haydock style, pound. Well, it didn't happen. Northside rattled off 21 straight points and ended up winning 21-14. This feels like a game that Wayne has to win. If they're going to find that elusive dub this season, I think it has to come tonight out at Wayne Stadium against Southside, a Southside team that also, as we know, had to miss last week because of quarantine issues. They've got, some guys that are missing this week as well, and not a lot of depth. So both these programs mirror one another in a lot of ways. And again, will it come down to turnovers and special teams? Two areas that both teams have struggled a little bit this year. I give Wayne a slight edge playing at home, and I think they've got a little bit better ground game right now. So I'm going to give the Generals a slight edge.
Quincy English started off the season pretty hot at quarterback. He's been slowed down as of late. Southside, though, playing some tough opponents there. Dwenger was the last time out, 50-14. Do you see the passing game or the running game of Southside getting going this week?
Well, I think it's got to be the running game. I think they've got to try to dictate tempo. This is going to be a bit of a slog, I would think, against Wayne. I think this game could be over in like 2 hours. Both teams trying to run the ball, short passing attack, and I think we need to see a little bit more of Jalen Lattimore. I know he's not a prototypical running back, but he's such a big, strong, athletic kid. I think Coach Tiny Lee needs to force feed him more carries between the tackles because he's not going backwards. Let's put it that way. He's going to get 2, 3, 4 yards a pop, even if the blocking's not there every play. So I think you gotta ride him. He needs to have, in my opinion, upward of 15 to 20 carries for the Archers to hang around.
And pretty special for the junior running back, Lamarian Nelson. He's made the Summit City Sports top 10 every single week. Teams know that he's going to be the guy and he's going to tote the ball, and he just keeps on producing for Coach Haydock. Speaks a lot to the junior running back over at Wayne.
Yeah, he had a huge JV season a year ago, Jeff, and Coach Haydock told me in the preseason, a lot of people don't really know about this guy. They're not paying much attention to him. He's going to have a really big year for us. And I think he wants to see Sean Collins used a little bit more on the edge, certainly in their passing game, which they haven't really developed yet. The problem is they haven't found that reliable outside guy to complement Collins in the slot. When they do, it could be Justin Alexander, it could be, somebody like that might break free. The Williams kid, number 19, is another potential candidate. When they find that perimeter guy out wide, Jeff, in their passing game, I think Wayne's offense could slowly start to develop because they're starting to get a little bit of confidence. They're running the ball successfully. Now they just have to have a little bit more reliability with that passing attack. Aiden Meek's got the ability. He just needs one more weapon, I think, for it to kind of evolve.
Lastly, Casey, Norwell's traveling to New Haven. Norwell's ranked number 11 in the AP, number 12 in the coaches poll in 3A. New Haven last week, they fought hard. They were up 8-0 against Leo. We thought, holy cow, could it be? But obviously Leo just too much to handle. Jakar Williams is a special quarterback. I wanted to put him on the top 10 because there was just so many drop passes from the receivers. And these are balls that are right in their hands. Yep. Very catchable balls. James Hardy, the fourth, got his first catch of the season. He looked really dynamic out in space running the ball. It was a 22-yard gain. And Mylan Graham, just a sophomore, he's one of the most special athletes in Northern Indiana.
Yeah, Mylan Graham's got a different gear for sure. I mean, you watch him in space and kind of like a young Nate Anderson is what he reminds me of in space, where he's just got a little bit different acceleration and really good athlete. They've got the parts. Again, we say it every week. They've been stricken, I think, by injuries and by quarantine as well. Last week, 8-0, the safety early on and the touchdown. And you just thought, my goodness, could this be the week that Leo gets tested prematurely? Well, then Leo just steamrolled him from there. And I think that speaks to how good Leo is in the trenches on both sides of the ball and where New Haven is right now in terms of Coach Kyle Boer trying to develop this program. I think they're still a year or two away in terms of developing some of these guys, but they've got a senior quarterback in Jakar Williams, who's a special talent. They need to ride him for everything he's worth. And we talk a little bit about Luke Halpert out at Snider running a little bit more. I think you got to do more with Jakar too. I'd like to see more true quarterback sweeps and blasts where you have a full backfield, a full house backfield, or you have a slot receiver coming in motion, cracking back or something, or leading through the hole. Something, get an extra blocker in there and let that big strong athlete find some holes and see if you can't shorten the game, because as you mentioned, those drops were killers. I mean, you have to factor him in. It's certainly not the quarterback's fault when he puts the ball in somebody's hands. And I think there was probably 6 or 7 that I counted watching the game. And, maybe you can alleviate some of that by not depending on the passing game so much, Jeff, and pound that rock. And I think with Jakar Williams, you can do some of that. You can get 3, 4, 5 yards a pop with him as a true running back, almost like a wildcat set, and just say, hey, this is what we're going to do. And then you can play action out of that or throw out of that and catch somebody off guard. And maybe that shortens the game a little bit and keeps the Bulldogs hanging around. But Norwell right now, other than that loss to Leo, looks to be really, really efficient. They're still missing senior Bo Morgan is their two-way starter that they're missing in the receiving core and secondary, but Luke Graft is back. There's a good shot of him there in tonight's game night. John Colbert, 2 really good 1-2 running back combination. Both had really impressive rushing numbers in last week's win over Belmont. I think we're going to see a heavy dose of both those guys, maybe a little play action passing as well. And I think Norwell right now is probably a 2-touchdown favorite in this game.
Yeah, I'd probably have to disagree with that. I think even though you got a 1-3 team and a 3-1 team, these teams are pretty evenly matched. And looking at these defensive tackles, now I know not everybody puts them in, but just to give you some perspective, the leading tackler in the NE8 has 37 tackles, Nathaniel Williams from DeKalb. Isaac Carswell entered last week with 44 tackles. I believe he had over 10 tackles last week again as well. He's a special linebacker. He just has a nose for the ball, and he is solid. I mean, when he hits you, you go backwards. So I really like this game. I think it's going to be a fun one out there at New Haven.
Yeah, Isaac Carswell was the lone Bulldog to make our preseason top 40. And I think some people question that. I saw some people question it at the beginning of the season. I'm like, guys, this is a really good high school football player. And Isaac's really risen to the occasion. I got to bring out my helmets for this week. I didn't get a chance to do this when we were talking East Noble. This one, I had to put a little tape on it because the hardware that Coach Amstead sent didn't line up. So I kind of had to makeshift tape this one together. And then, of course, the Leo Lions, the big purple helmet with the lion on it. So this This definitely is the matchup. This is the one I'm going to be spending a lot of time on tonight, enjoying. I'll be watching a lot of action, but paying special close attention to this. This is a really important game in the NE8, and I think this might be the game of the year in the regular season for Northeast Indiana.
Casey, just real quick, if one defense in the SAC could give Leo fits, which one would you pick?
It's a good question. I think the one defense they would struggle with the most, the Leo Lions right now, would probably be Bishop Dwengers. I think Dwenger's built to take away a running attack more than a passing attack. Snider's been vulnerable against the passes we've seen. Carroll was certainly week one, and then and Homestead was too. That I could change my mind after Luers plays Dwenger, though, right? And I mean, if Luers goes off for big passing numbers against the Saints, and they very well might, I might change my mind. But if there's one SAC team that I think defensively could match up with this Leo team, it might be Bishop Dwenger. But that being said, Leo's offensive line is tremendous. It's the best in the area, and they may be able to run for big yards against the Saints too. They're that good this year.
Yeah, and if I was going to have to pick a defense, I was thinking about this. I'd have to say the Carroll Chargers after what I saw against Snider and Northside. Well, Casey, thanks again for joining us. Once again, everybody, enjoy week number 5. It's going to be a good one here. We're going to figure out a lot in the SAC and really the NE8 with that matchup there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this condensed version of Northeast Indiana Game Night preview. My name is Jeff Mahoney, and that, of course, as always, is Casey O'Boyle.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Jeff.